This experience happened 40 years ago, when I was 10 years old. I developed flu-like symptoms, coughing so badly that I couldn't eat for almost a week. My mother called the doctor in my hometown with concern in her voice, but the doctor assured her that it was just a common flu. At its worst, I had severe pain in my chest every time I coughed. Later, my symptoms slowly disappeared. My parents thought I would soon recover and go back out to work. So during the last few days of my illness, I was home alone. One of those afternoons, I was so thirsty that I walked from the couch to the kitchen sink. The glass of water tasted sweeter than honey, but when I turned around and went back into the living room, I went black and I passed out. I woke up later on the kitchen floor, and I don't know how long I was there. That night, I told my mother about the experience and she seemed very worried. The next day, I suddenly felt much better. But extraordinarily pale, my father insisted on taking me to the doctor. I will never forget the look on the doctor's face. The doctor poked the intestines around my appendix and I remember the doctor telling my mother that his condition was serious and that he had to schedule an operation as soon as possible. Due to work, my father left for another city that morning and could not be reached for several hours. My mother hesitated and the doctor again insisted that the situation was serious. The doctor recommended surgery that afternoon. The nurses did the pre-surgery preparations. My mother was in and out of the room as she called others in hopes of reaching my father. This surgeon took a long drive over to help. My mother told me not to worry, but she sounded scared as I was wheeled into the operating room. Now I was scared and I started crying. The nurses became stern. Soon a mask with a screen was put on my face. I was told to breathe deeply, as if I were blowing into a balloon. I coughed and cried at the same time. Soon, everything went black. Just shortly after everything went black, I realized I could think. I wondered where I was now. I was floating alone in a dark universe. Soon, I saw a group of glowing creatures flying around. They flew past me and then circled around me. I was scared and they seemed to fly closer. I remember that they kept laughing at me. I became so scared that I cried out in fear and I wanted to end it all. Then the situation changed and I noticed that I started to float upward, away from the pixies. When my fear disappeared, I was floating alone in the universe again. Soon after, I noticed a giant cone dotted with glittering stars. As I looked upward, I could see it spinning, with the stars concentrated in a smaller opening at the top. I continued to float upward and soon I reached the top, where I hit an obstacle and could not continue moving upward. I stayed there for a while when I suddenly felt something tugging at me from the other side. I was grabbed by the arm and I was pulled through the barrier to the other side. The man was about 30 years old. He was very friendly and he acted surprised to see me. He didn't know who I was. I just stood there. Then several other people came around. They were all older and very friendly. They asked me who I was. I gave my first and last name, and they asked more questions. They said we were relatives, but they wanted to know who my father was. I told them my father's name. Then they seemed to catch their breath, because they knew my father. The older ones introduced themselves as my father's great-grandparents, and they welcomed me and were very happy to see me. The two grandmothers hugged me, trying to make sure I understood that this was a safe place because I was very confused about what was happening. They introduced me to the young man who pulled me in. He was my father's cousin who had died in the Korean War. I seemed to gain strength here, and I realized that it was warm and comfortable. We were all surrounded by a white light, which was very pleasant. I also noticed that we all had a blue glow about us. They showed me some high-backed chairs that they would often sit in. To me, these chairs looked a bit like thrones. They showed me my father's future chair, and then they showed me one of my chairs. I sat on it for a while and it was very comfortable to sit on. I was curious and observed everything around me. Then I was shown every generation of my father's family, going back hundreds of years, sitting in their own chairs. The older generation did not come up to me to say hello, I don't know why. They told me to wait a moment and that someone else very special was coming to greet me. I saw an older woman who shone brighter than the others. Her love was more intense, and this was indeed a very special woman. I was completely enveloped by this woman's love and I felt very relaxed, like a baby asleep in its mother's arms. She told me many things. She said that she was a messenger from God, assigned to examine my life. She had the ability to enter my mind, and together we reviewed my past like a flickering movie. She seemed satisfied with what she saw until we saw an incident when my brother grabbed my toy. I hit him on the head with a baseball bat. My brother cried a lot. She said, "It is absolutely unacceptable to hurt someone like that." I felt so ashamed. After the review, this particular woman took me back to my grandparents and said it was time for me to make a decision. I could stay here with them, or I could go back and finish my life. My two great-grandmothers tried to convince me to stay, and they encouraged me to sit in the chair again, which I did. But soon I was up again, because I couldn't calm down inside. Then that particular woman told me that my mother would be very sad if I decided to stay. I told them that I loved my mother and I didn't want to make her sad, so I wanted to go back. One of my great-grandmothers reminded me that if I was sent back, it could ruin me because life on earth is so hard. That particular woman told her that she had to respect my own decision, and all my relatives said goodbye to me, and they instructed me to do well in school. But at the same time, they seemed to be telling me what my future would be. They said I would marry a girl with long hair and would have a daughter. The young man who dragged me there at the beginning sent me to the place where I met with him. When I came to the exit he reminded me, I was told to try to relax as I descended. The descent was not so pleasant and it would be very fast. I went back to my body and remembered the feeling of landing. I felt very painful. Soon I opened my eyes and my mother was holding my hand. I immediately told her that I had met her grandmother and that she was very nice. She was stunned, and the other relatives in the room reassured me that it was just a dream. I knew they were wrong. I understand that they chose not to believe what a 10-year-old said, and I believe that time will give the answer.